All right, well, let's get this party started. Welcome, everyone. This is HubSync's monthly series, Work Smarter, Not Harder. And today's topic is going to be what you see here on the screen, how to avoid the technology pitfalls, common mistakes to avoid in the buying process. We have my esteemed colleague, Jason Goldfinger, who's out of North Carolina, safe and dry. And he's going to address these issues. He's been in this space for a pretty long
Long
time.
time.
You want to skip to
Long
the
time.
next slide?
Yeah, sure.
He's been in the space for a long time, knows our industry, knows, worked with many different technology solutions, and is going to kind of address what we have here up on the screen. The pitfalls of acquiring new technology, right? The good and the bad, what to avoid, how to prevent certain issues. What are the best practices when evaluating, approving, or even purchasing the technology? There's so many solutions on the market today. It's hard to make a decision, right? And what should you expect during this process? So we're obviously going
And
to give some examples.
I'll give some examples of how HubSync does that during this webinar, since obviously I work for HubSync, but I think we do a pretty good job of these items.
Yep. So that's what we're going to talk through. Obviously, you can ask questions at any point in time. Just use the chat, and I will make sure I break through and let Jason know what the questions are. In terms of his background, actually, Jason, why don't I let you kind of give rather than
Sure.
me read through? Why don't we let everyone? I'm going to kick it over, hand it over to you, Jason. Everyone, enjoy. You're going to enjoy this one. This
Awesome.
is a good one. This is getting your hands dirty and really understanding what to do when you're looking in technology.
Yeah, I've been waiting to do this webinar for a long time. So why am I actually qualified to talk about this? I've been selling tech into the accounting industry for my entire career. So I worked with over 10,000 accounting firms during this time. I led the accounting sales team at Citrix ShareFile, which I'm sure some of you are familiar with. I led the accounting sales team at Mango Practice Management. That's a smaller SMB software company. And now at HubSync, I work with top 200 every day. So what are the pitfalls? Obviously, there are a lot outside of this list, but these are the main ones that I've seen. So the product is missing assumed functionality. The features that you looked for weren't fully developed yet. The implementation itself failed. You tried to build it internally, but it didn't work out. There is no adoption after you've actually implemented it. After you've been using the tool for a long time, you love it. It's been 2-3 years. And then boom, the vendor says, we're going to 3x your price. We're going to triple your pricing, what you're paying for it. And it's no longer justifiable for the firm. I have indecision in here because although it's not actually purchasing technology, it is an alternative to purchasing technology, and there are pitfalls in that. And then the vendor isn't a good partner, and that's kind of tough to tell before you actually get into working with them. So these are the main ones. There are a lot of other ones that you're going to run into, but these are what I've seen over my career. And given that I've spoken with 10,000 accounting firms, I've heard every horror story. I've heard every bad thing you can think of. And usually firms are coming to another tech vendor because something went really wrong. So there's some big issue. And so I've heard about that as they've come to me. And we don't really get an opportunity to have the transparency between tech firms and the sales side of, hey, this is what you should look out for. This is what I've seen. And so I thought this webinar would be a really good way to show all of that. Okay, so the product is missing assumed functionality. So you bought the technology, it's implemented, it seems great, and then 6 months in, you realize, hey, it doesn't have this tool, it doesn't do this specific workflow. I thought it would. With good vendors, missing functionality like that, especially for the more unique workflows or processes, is miscommunication. It's not misrepresenting the product. Bad vendors, you're going to get the opposite side. They'll misrepresent what they can actually do. But good vendors don't want you to have gaps with their product at all. They don't want to be 6-8 months into the product and realize there's something specific you wanted out of their tool, and it turns out you don't do it. So how do we avoid this? With your really foundational, important workflows, define those And the best way to do that is to get the practitioners involved. And getting the practitioners and service line leaders involved during the process is pervasive through all of these pitfalls. But define what those workflows are, make sure you write them down, and then send them over to the vendor and say, hey, we need to be able to do X, Y, and Z with your product. Can you confirm that your tool can actually handle that functionality? And it's important to do this because when I'm working with a firm, I'm doing 30, 40, 50, 100 meetings with them pre-sale, right? And during that time, there's tons of side questions, a ton of different teams and service lines getting involved, and little comments. Sometimes things get missed. Not the big ones. The big ones shouldn't get missed. But over a 6, 9, 12-month sales cycle, things can get missed. And so you want to make sure the really important items are communicated in writing and that the vendor confirms they can actually do that. And if you haven't seen that important item in a demo, ask for it. If the firm says they can do it, if the vendor says they can do it, you should be able to see it. Okay, promised features aren't developed. This is when you're buying a tool because it has a really great roadmap, and a lot of the items on the roadmap are what you want. And so I've seen it countless times where a firm purchases technology, and then they had a roadmap from that vendor that said, in 3 months we'll have this, in 6 months we'll have this. So near term, by the time you're implemented, you'll have this feature in place. 18 months later, the feature doesn't exist. It still is not in the tool. Doesn't seem like it's going to be in there anytime soon. And that was one of the reasons why you purchased that tool. So the ways to prevent this is that you want to go with an innovative vendor, but you also want to depend on the roadmap that they have. You don't want a vendor that doesn't develop at all. Hey, this is our product. This is all it's going to be. You want one that's innovative, but you want to make sure they can actually deliver on time. So they should have a history of this, and you should be able to ask for it. So asking them, hey, show me your roadmap from the previous 12 months. Show me what you delivered on that roadmap. And then even further than that, what was the timeline you actually delivered it compared to what you initially proposed? And keep in mind that there should be some delay occasionally because a good vendor will be testing and making sure everything is good. And sometimes that delays things if there are bugs. If a vendor is always releasing on time, they probably have more bugs in their system. But a good vendor will always have fully tested items. But as long as they're directionally delivering on that roadmap, that's a good vendor. And they should sometimes push back on you because you're going to find vendors that always say yes. If a vendor is always saying yes to you, that's not a good thing. That means that they're not fully committed to delivering on the timeline that they are saying they will. So whenever a vendor pushes back, you should learn to appreciate that because it means they are serious about committing to that delivery. At HubSync, sorry, I've got a cold. At HubSync, we give you view into our Jira board so you can actually see what we're delivering, what we're planning on building, and what the timeline is. Here's a screenshot from an old roadmap of what that actually looks like. Cassie, do we have any questions yet? I'm not looking at it if we do. It's okay if we don't.
Not so far, not into the chat just yet. But just a reminder to everyone out there, please feel free to drop any questions into the chat and I will break in and let Jason know. Looks like he needs a break to cough sometimes anyway, right?
Yeah, that's pretty bad. Okay.
So feel free to jump in with questions.
Implementations are half of delivering technology. It's the hardest part. It's where a lot of these tech buying decisions go wrong. So when you're vetting a vendor, they should be able to really deliver pre-sales on what an implementation will look like. And so you should be asking for a lot of different items to understand what will their implementation process look like. The first one being an implementation timeline. At HubSync, here's a quick view of one we've done previously. And this is important for you internally to discuss the timeline as well as vetting the vendor. So you should be able to see what is the timeline looking like to deliver the different portions of the product. And when you involve the stakeholders internally, This will be good to be able to say, hey, we can't implement that portion during extension season, as an example. And what will happen is that will stop future pitfalls of, if we didn't see this, then when we tried to implement it and sorry, I saw a question pop up. And so when they tried to implement it and then, hey, we can't do it right now. I can't change my workflows. We're in the middle of extension season. The implementation gets all screwed up. Everything gets delayed and it messes up the entire thing. So this is important both for discussions internally and for when you're talking with the vendor. An implementation plan. Show me the step-by-step plan for how you are going to actually implement this. This will be important so you know what the needs are from the vendor, from internally, what actually needs to happen so you can plan for it. And then further, what are the resources needed? We provide a document that says, this is the type of person we need in your role. We need somebody to handle the project. We need somebody to handle this portion of it. And that will make it so that you have all your resources internally set up. References related to implementation. References are so important when it comes to vetting technology because they've been there and they've done that. When you talk to references, and generally we'll provide up to two at HubSync, so you can talk to two of our different firms, ask them, what did implementation look like? How did they do? Did they go according to plan? Did the timeline get delivered on time? Did the items get delivered on time? Asking that and really making sure what's it going to look like when I will go with this vendor, because even though firms are different, your implementation with a vendor will look similar to what they've done with other firms.
All right, so one question that we do have relates to over customized products, and I know that I face that. I'm sure you have as well. So the client has a lot of requests. Oh, well, we're a little bit different to everybody else. Could we have this customization or that customization? The vendor wants to make the client happy and provide those products. But how does, I guess two questions. One, how does HubSync handle those custom requests in the vein of keeping the project on track and not over customizing it so that you get yourself into a situation later?
Yeah, I think this connects to a lot of things in this deck because you want someone that understands your firm, understands the industry, understands what you actually need as a firm. You may have a perfect vision of what a workflow should look like or a functionality should look like, but 80% of it is of that workflow being achieved by the vendor is 200% better than what you're currently doing. So I think it's important if the vendor can understand what you're really asking for, make suggestions, guide you on how you could use our tool to achieve that as a workaround, or how long it would take us to actually implement it as a new feature, and having an honest delivery timeline of that. So if a vendor is saying we can't have that until next year, but here's what we would recommend for that, that's who you want to go with. If they're just saying yes, yeah, we'll do that, trying to get the sale, that's not a good sign.
Okay.
Good question.
Okay.
Integrations are another hot topic today in the industry because data is so important, and core systems and sources of truth are a big part of a firm. And what I've seen is vendors talk a very big game about integrations, but very few can actually deliver on what they say they are going to deliver. And so asking a vendor, what integrations have you already done? What did it look like? If they haven't done your specific integration that you're looking for, have you done similar? Okay, you haven't integrated with our ERP, but you've integrated with another ERP. What data fields did you map with? What did that process look like? And going through it with them to make sure they actually know what they're talking about. And who are they partnered with? I know that we're partnered with CCH and TR and Iris and others. And you want a vendor that's familiar with your tech stack. They've worked with your sort of products before, because there will be obstacles that come up. And it's good if that vendor can handle the random things that come up and have direct communication with your tech stack. Data flow chart, really important because you want to know, going along with that data discussion, how is this new product going to interface with the other products that we have and how the data flows. And this will be good to discuss internally to help with adoption later on so that everyone is understanding of, okay, this is what the new process will do. This is how the workflow will look, and make sure that the vendor knows how to talk about that and discuss that. The last item here is outsourced implementations. What I've seen in the industry is that, except in scenarios where the vendor only sells to a specific industry and always outsources their implementations. Besides that one scenario, outsourcing implementations hardly ever goes well because the implementation partner you're working with is working with real estate and healthcare and legal and all these other industries. They aren't going to speak your language. And accounting is so unique in the workflows and the processes of how your firm works. You need to be talking with somebody that knows your business, your industry. It's so important for accounting. And if a vendor is saying, yeah, we outsource it to this great firm, they're fantastic. If that vendor is working outside of accounting and the partner they're working with is not who they deal with every single implementation, you're going to run into trouble.
Question from the market regarding integrations. The question is, what track record does HubSync have with integrations? Is HubSync limited to only a handful of options? So really just overall integrations and the experience that HubSync has with integrating different systems.
We've integrated with dozens of products at this point. We're very comfortable with, I mean, like I said, we're partnered with CCH and TR, so we've integrated with all of those products, or most of them. Our team is very good at integrations. It's a core competency of our tool to be able to integrate with your tech stack and have the data centralized and then used throughout HubSync. I think it's why a lot of people go with HubSync, and it's made us very, very good at that sort of workflow. Okay, internal builds. I put this in here because it is an alternative to the technology solution process. And I just wanted to give insight into what I've seen, because I would say over 75% of firms that I've worked with, before they've come to the company I'm working with at that time, they've tried to fix this internally by building it or by developing something. And it's a really tricky game because you really have to be dedicated to building a technology arm of your accounting firm in order to be successful developing your own technology. The usual case is that timelines and costs end up being 3 times what you expect. Oh yeah, we think it's going to take 2 years and $300K, and it's always so much more time, so much more money. The other difficult part of it is you're trying to get buy-in and what features should be a part of this tool for a product that doesn't exist from multiple service line leaders. And so it's easy for a service line leader to look at an existing product when you're vetting a vendor and say, okay, I see it does this, this, and this. That's good, but it doesn't do this. When you're talking about creating something from scratch, it's a much more complicated discussion. And so when you're communicating that with the dev team and what their goals are, it ends up being a very long and arduous process that ends up costing a lot of money, millions required, and the time just keeps on going on and things get delayed. And so this quote, I had to put this in here, was from earlier this year, a firm I was speaking with, and they mentioned that we were paying $500K per year for 3 devs over a 5-year period to build this, and by the time it was done, it was outdated. And this is a really common tale where a firm commits to a 3 or 4 person dev team, they start building a tool, it takes much longer than expected, it costs a ton of money, and then they deliver it and it's 5 years, 7 years out of date. And so for a lot of firms, buying something off the shelf, not just HubSync, any vendor off the shelf, will be more cost effective, and it immediately will solve your issue instead of waiting to build it. There are firms that have done this successfully. They're just firms that have invested 10, 20, $30 million in a technology arm, and that's one of the initiatives, is to create an entire industry inside the firm towards building tech. No adoption. So you bought the tech, it's great, you implement it, everything's going well, and then the firm doesn't actually use it. They start, you get 10% of people doing it this way, 90% are still doing things the other way. This is all about including people in the decision and during the implementation process and defining your processes. So include all service line leaders in the decision while you're looking at technology so they have skin in the game. Define those new workflows during implementation prior to the usage itself. You should be communicating to your employees, this is what the new process will be. Don't do this anymore. This is how you're going to do it. It should be a mandate. You need top-down support from your executives to say, this is what we're going to do. This is what everybody needs to be doing moving forward. That will really pay off. And then designate change agents with frontline employees. You should have staff accountants, managers that are actually using the technology, speaking with clients, whatever it is, working with the tool, encouraging their team members, hey, do it like this. They should be trained above, they should be power users on the tool so that they can be encouraging their coworkers on how to use it. Communication to employees and clients during this is key, and the real priority is to over communicate, because people don't read every email. Just keep on sending things just so they know this is for real.
And this is really where I've seen a lot of people struggle, firms struggle, right? There needs to be generally a technology leader per office or per area to really help the adopt. It's the adoption, right? People want to do what they do. So if anyone who's out there has some best practices on what they've done to drive adoption or change management, that'd be helpful just to share with everyone. But that's really where I see a lot of the problems happening.
Yep. Debilitating price increases. This is a very common tale. I'm sure everyone on the call has faced this at some point. You're using a tool, it's great. You've had a great relationship with them, and then they get acquired by PE, right? Or they get, they take PE money or something happens. There's a change of control, or they just come out with a brand new product and they jack up your price to double, triple costs. Suddenly, this is no longer justifiable for the firm. So to prevent this, ask for a price lock during the discussion, ask for a cost of living adjustment clause. Hey, we want to make sure this doesn't increase more than 7% per year, 10% or 5%. Talk to them about making sure that we can have a multi-year agreement here. And at renewal time, we want to make sure this is not going to just increase costs. So even if you've been happy with them for 4 or 5 years, if you have a renewal coming up, talk to them about price locks. Don't just assume you're not going to get a huge price increase. So it's really good to put it into writing. Make sure you are contractually protected if the vendor has a change in control. So if they are acquired or purchased, that you're protected in that case. Indecision is a pitfall in itself. This is a result of not getting enough internal buy-in that this problem is worth solving or changing the way things are currently being done. The reason why this happens is because people are comfortable with where they are. People are comfortable with their processes, even if they are manual and subpar and costing the firm money. People don't like to change in general. There's been countless scenarios where multiple teams at a firm realize there's a huge benefit to purchasing a tool, but they can't get buy-in from another key team that needs to be involved because that team really likes their processes. And the key here is to not look for a perfect solution. Generally, and I said this earlier in the webinar, 80% of what you're looking for is going to be miles better than what most firms are currently doing with their manual processes. And you should be thinking long-term instead of short-term. Even though it may be a bumpy road for the next 6, 12, 18 months to implement a new technology, think of how the firm will benefit 5, 7, 10 years later by implementing that technology, because you can either be the firm that stays with the status quo, has the manual processes, the inefficiencies until you end up making a decision, or you're one of the firms that's growing and innovating and sometimes ripping the Band-Aid off and going with the technology to move the firm forward. Okay, so you realize the vendor you started working with, they aren't that great to work with. So here are some red flags to look out for vendors. Then I've got the next slide is some things to look out for that are good. So if you are the biggest firm they've worked with, or they're not being used by any of your peers, this is a red flag. I've worked at the companies that cater to the smaller mid-size SMB market, and enterprise accounting firms, the top 100 firms, they are a completely different animal. So much, they're unique in their processes. The service lines are much bigger. They need more configuration in the tools. And the vendors that are used to working with smaller firms, they're not prepared for it. It's a totally different process. So you don't want to be the biggest firm because you're going to end up being the guinea pig of scalability for that vendor. And also, you want them to be being used by your peers so you can talk to them about it, and maybe there's a reason why the peers aren't using it yet. It's a red flag if the majority of your important features, foundational important features, are roadmap items. So if the tool looks like it has a good start and everything's great, but a lot of the important things you're looking for are 6-12 months out, I would just say wait. If it's a foundational thing, if it's something completely different than what you're looking for of what the product currently is, just wait until they deliver those items, because if you're waiting and buying on a roadmap, you're going to be in a bad spot. And they are slow or difficult to communicate with during the sales process. During the sales process, the salesperson should be very quick to respond. They should always be paying attention to you. And if they're not, it means either they don't care about getting you as a client, or the sales rep is not communicating internally about your firm, and they're not going to be that great to work with post-sale. So on the sales front, you should be really feeling the love, because that's when they really should be looking their best at a minimum. But if your sales rep is not being super communicative, that's a red flag. Okay, what to look for in a vendor. They recommend, almost a time. They recommend timelines that make sense based on your needs, not on their goals. They shouldn't be thinking of themselves. They should be thinking of you as a client. They guide you based off of their experience in the accounting profession. They should almost have a crystal ball of, you might have this happen with this team. You might have this happen with that certain portion of your workflow. They should really be a step ahead for you. They should speak your language and specialize in the accounting industry. You should ask references. Hey, when things have gone wrong, because they will with almost any vendor, any product, ask the references, how did that vendor respond? Because that's key to how they communicate and work with you. They should have a proven record of implementing features from customer feedback. In the negotiation and legal terms process, they should be flexible, not giving you everything, but in terms of focusing on the long-term partnership, they should be flexible to a degree to say, hey, we're willing to work with you because we're more focused on a long-term partnership with you instead of these lower level items. And the last one, of course, they should feel comfortable giving a webinar on going with the right vendor or technology. So we are at time. Was there any other questions that came through, Betsy? You're on mute.
Nope, we got through them. We're good.
Awesome. Okay, well, I appreciate everyone taking a look today. I hope it was helpful, and thank you so much for joining.
Thank you.